So today we're going to find out how a Kabbalist builds his house. And we're finishing off yesterday. We had spoken about, what topic were we speaking about yesterday? Help remind me. We were talking about how you have Chochmah, Binah, Daas. The intellect is the mothers of the emotions, because what you think is what ends up happening in your feelings. Now today we're going to describe how a Kabbalist builds his house. So let's say that you have an idea in your head. You're walking down the street one day and you're like, you know what? I would really like to live in a house. I'd like to have a house. I wouldn't like to be not so homeless. I don't want to live in a little apartment building. I want to live in a house. You decide one day you want to live in a house. So you tell that you're walking down the street with your friend and you're like, you know what? I just realized I want to build a house. So that's called Chochmah. You had the idea. Chochmah is, we said with the 3 C's, it's conception. It's coming up with the idea. It's a flash of intuition. It's called in some places in Chassidus a lightning bolt. It just strikes you. It's like, I got it. It's that moment that you click your fingers and you're like, got it. You know? It's the moment. I once saw a cartoon of this guy who has this like lightning, this light bulb come up over his head, and then it dies, and he has a bunch of dead light bulbs around. It's like, I need ideas, but I only get light bulbs. Anyways, so that's the idea of Chochmah. It's the light bulb moment. It's the aha moment. You know what the aha moment is? You guys know about the aha day in camp? So, it's the aha moment. So, that's what Chochmah is. Now that we figured out you have the aha moment, when you have an idea, Label, what's the best idea you had today? Label realized he was walking down the street and he's like, you know, I'd really like to go to Cannes and buy some food for Tanya Chapter. That was the aha moment. But then after that, you need to start thinking of the details. And that's going to be Binah. Because remember, if Chochmah is conception, Binah is contemplation. Figuring out the details. So this guy who was Kabbalist building a house, after he had the idea to build a house, his friend's like, well, where do you want the house to be? And you're like, you know, maybe somewhere nice in New Jersey, you know, a bit of suburban neighborhood. He's like, well, how many bedrooms do you want? How many bathrooms? I once asked this guy, whatever, his name's not going to be mentioned. He told me my house, I bought my house, and my friend's like, how many bathrooms does it have? So I'm like, it has 2 bathrooms and 3 trees. So, you have to figure out if you want a driveway, if you want a garage, a double garage, a single garage. There's so many details, and then when you think you have all the details figured out, you sit down with the manager for the construction project, and you realize how many details there really are. And then once you finalize with him, you think you figured out all the details. Then 3 years into the project, when nothing's happened, then you realize how many details there really are. So that's Binah, is figuring out every detail. So let's say with Label, he was walking down the street and he had this idea in Chochmah. He's like, I really want to buy snacks for Tanya Chapter, so everyone can enjoy some snacks by Tanya Chapter. And then he's like, hey, which snacks am I going to get? And what's my budget? And how am I going to get them back? And do I want to get delivery? And which store should I go to? And which flavor? He's got all the details to figure out. So that's what Binah is. So now, since we're talking about the Nefesh Elokis, what is the Nefesh Elokis like doing? Besides for obviously providing snacks for Tanya Chapter, the Nefesh Elokis very much enjoys. You ready for this? Hashem. So let's talk about what Chochmah and Binah will look like with Nefesh Elokis. That it comes out with a Chochmah, an idea. That it's like, hey, it's thinking about Hashem. The Hashem is Hashem. It's called Chochmah. Chochmah, the word Chochmah, if you split up the words, split up the letters, Koyach, the power, the ability, Ma of what? So, there's 2 meanings to this. The first one is the ability to say what. That's what Chochmah is. It's the idea. It's the ability to get out of your little box, out of your perspective, and say, wow, something else. What's this? What's this idea? I never thought of that. You know, some people live their entire lives in an apartment building. And that's, they think, is completely normal. And they never ever thought to move to a house. Some people have Chochmah, so they go out of their perspective. They're like, my whole life I'm used to an apartment building, but how about if I had a house? That's Chochmah. Koyach, the ability to say what? The ability to say, what is this? A new idea. A theory. What's the word again? A hypotenuse. No, that's not the word. No, oh, that's the one. Hypothesis. Wow. That would have worked. Hypotenuse is very different. That's the triangle one. Yeah? So, a hypothesis. Much better word. I nearly sounded sophisticated for one moment there. But at the moment, Chochmah is the ability to have a hypothesis. You know what that is? It's a very scientific, fancy way of saying an idea. I don't know why they needed such a big word for coming up with an idea, but my hypothesis of why they use hypothesis is that it can sound very hypocritical. So, All jokes aside, that's what Chochmah is. Chochmah, the ability to say, what is this? A new idea. Think of a different perspective. By the way, imagine if no one had Chochmah in the world. How disgraceful and how boring the world would be. Because everyone has their own ideas. Do you ever wonder why some people get into arguments about very silly things? And in the arguments, you would think every argument in humankind would be logical. This guy would say, hey, I'll prove you my point through this data. And the other guy would say, I'll have other data and logic and ideas. But most fights aren't like that. Most fights are just like, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. It's why? Because people see things differently. People have different perspectives. People are made differently. Everyone has different fingerprints and different emotional fingerprints and different intellectual fingerprints. Everyone thinks differently and sees things differently. And then everyone's raised differently and comes from different places. Everyone has different ideas about what's good and bad. So, therefore, you have very often people just stuck in their ideas because they have a lack of Chochmah. Now imagine that. Imagine if everyone here had no Chochmah, so didn't have the ability to say what. The ability to say, what is this? Challenge an idea. Think of a new idea. Open up to something new. Then what would happen? We'd have here, I would be trying to teach, and you would be like, well, I haven't heard that before, so it must be wrong. And you'd say something else, and I'd be like, well, I never heard that before, so it must be wrong. Because we'd all be stuck in our own perspective. Really, I think we'd have world peace if we had more Chochmah, if people were able to open up a bit more and try to appreciate a new idea, a new understanding, something different. It's called being open-minded. It means, okay, open-minded doesn't mean surrendering on your ideals. It means, I know who I am and what I stand for. Now, I'd like to hear your side of the story. That's what Chochmah is about. The other meaning of Chochmah, Chochmah, you're going to have to wait till chapter 18 to find out. And we're going to get there in approximately next week, but maybe not next week. Maybe like next week in like 6 years. So, what happens when you're using your Chochmah and you bring out from the potential to the actual? So when you think of this new idea about Hashem and you bring out your ability that you start thinking in your mind to understand properly all the details, then it's called Binah. When you take that little point of Chochmah, that little idea, and you start building on it, you start expanding on it, you start theorizing on it. You know, most people who write books, most books can be summarized in like 5 sentences. You ever thought about that? Shmuel, you ever read a book in your life? Never read a book in your life. Label, you ever read a book in your life? Beautiful. Label read a book. We're getting somewhere. So, you realize every book is just saying the same 1 to 5 points over and over and illustrating it in different ways and bringing it out in different ways. Because the guy had an idea, in his Chochmah, then he worked on the idea to explain it, bring it out, bring it into words in Binah to the point that it was like a 500-page book. That's how Chochmah and Binah work. Idea, and then conception, and then contemplation. So let's say you start conceiving the idea about Hashem. And then you start contemplating about, you ready for 3 things Alter Rebbe is going to say over here? You think about how Hashem fills all the worlds, surrounds all the worlds, and all is like nothing before him. Those are 3 things. When Malakom fills all worlds, I'm going to say this in very short points, and everyone who really appreciates this is going to get very mad while watching this, because fills the world means the way Hashem affects the world. Hashem's like, okay, I'm going to make a world which is so not godly that creations there that not only think that they're separate from God, they actually sometimes act separate from God, which is pretty crazy. So Hashem has to whittle down his light, his energy, his godliness to the point that it's small enough to be contained within such a world. Then Soviv Kolmin means surrounding the world. Now, you guys think that Soviv Kolmin is like a satellite going around the world like this to give everyone Wi-Fi, but it's really not, because the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Memches, chapter 48, which we're going to get into in how many years? This year is going to get there in like 600 years. 200. Okay, fine. I'm ahead of schedule. So, what do you say over there? It doesn't mean surrounding like around. It means here, but not in an affecting way. Here in a way that we don't really tap into it. Oya Soiviv is like the internet wave, when the internet was just invented, and some guys are communicating by internet, and then there's this other guy who's just got his radio on. The internet is there. The signals are being sent. He could tap into Wi-Fi, but I'm sorry, you don't have the equipment. It's here, but you're not tapping into it. That's what Oya Soiviv is. Hashem is here in all his glory, just sadly you can't tap into it. As opposed to Oya Mamali, Hashem whittles it down to the most basic level that you can tap in. And then there's Kulik Mekolachshiv. Everything is like nothing before Hashem, which that's looking at everything's truth in the inner dimension. Deep down, everything is just Hashem. Everything is just Hashem expressing himself in 2 ways. In a way of revelation and a way of concealing. Because if I say Hashem can only reveal himself, that would be limiting Hashem. Everything is really part of Hashem. It's just the question is if Hashem wants to reveal himself in a way of revelation or a way of concealment. That's going to be all described in Tanya, Volume 2 of shiur Binah. You have to look that one up. So, now that we figured that out, that this guy can be thinking about these topics for like months on end, years on end, a lifetime spent thinking of these topics. You ever did this? You ever walked down the street and was thinking, wow, everything I'm seeing, all the trees, all the birds, the traffic, the police pulling someone over, it's all just really Hashem. And you're thinking about this more and more and more in detail. So it came from your Chochmah, of the idea, the tiny point. It came down to Binah, to be expanded into all its details. Now, what happens? It gives birth. How does it give birth? Because in Kabbalah, Chochmah and Binah are called Av and Aim, father and mother. Chochmah is considered the father, Binah is considered the mother. You know why? Because just like how do you make a baby that a father gives a little drop, and in the mother's womb for 9 months it builds and expands and it comes into details, and all the potential of those few chromosomes in those drops is built from one strand of DNA, into more strands of DNA, into a full human being. Wow, what a miracle. So too with ideas. Chochmah is like that tiny, tiny idea. It's just that tiny potential of an idea. It's just like the saying what? Chochmah. What is that? Oh, that's an interesting idea. That's a thought. That's going out of my box for a second. Then Binah is like the mother who builds up that idea into all its details. But what do they give birth to? Well, if your idea was a godly one, and if your thought process, breaking it down afterwards was a godly one, so then it's going to give birth to godly feelings. Those are the children. It says, we say in Hallel, it says in the book of Psalms, which is spelled with a P for some strange reason, just to confuse the Satan. That's why Tehillim is so powerful, because the Satan can never affect it, because it's always confused because there's a P in front. So, what happened? What do we say over there? It says, Aim habonim smecha. The mother of the children is rejoicing. And the reason is, in the Kabbalah, if you're a Kabbalist saying Hallel, you're going to realize just a second. The mother is Binah. So who are the children? Those are the emotions. That's why Aim habonim smecha, the mother of the children, causes joy, causes rejoicing, because the feelings come out. So what happens after your whole contemplation about godliness? 2 things. Number 1, you're blown away. If God's everywhere and everything, then what am I doing with my life? Then who am I? Then what am I? I just want to give myself over to Hashem. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed of anything I'm doing that's not godly. There's actually 3 types of fear or awe. It's not really fear. Fear is like you're scared of a spider. A better translation would be awe. You're awestruck. You ready for this? Number 1, you have fear of heights. You ever had fear of heights? Next year is going to be about fear of heights. Someone remind me about the time I went rock climbing in Guatemala. So, fear of heights is that you're like, whoa, Hashem's everywhere and everything. There's a big world out there. Not a world, much more than a world. There's Hashem. So what am I? And that's in your mind. Then you feel awe of Hashem, and then you feel embarrassed. Embarrassment is something much deeper. You're like, oi, how can I do something wrong? How can I be in existence? How can I be independent of Hashem if Hashem is everything? I'm living a lie if I'm not living a godly life. And then, you know what happens after that? After he starts to feel love for Hashem. Hashem's so great and everything. But still, and I'm so nothing, but still Hashem loves me and chooses me and wants me and gives me a mission and a purpose. Wow, what a great Hashem. What a great Father I have. How much I love Him. And then the person feels such a deep, burning, overpowering love to Hashem. And that is called Klois HaNefesh. It's called expiration of the soul. He feels like his soul is about to expire because the warranty just went out. No, I'm saying that his soul is about to go back to Hashem because he loves Hashem so much. And we're going to have to find out about fear of heights and about love for Hashem tomorrow. And then we're going to have to find out about how to be a Kabbalistic fireman in next year. Shneir's job is to remind me.